there's definitely been periods over the years of doing consistently 16-hour days. I've done a shift at 26 hours before.
How do you manage your own mental health and well-being as a leader of a team that is under that pressure?
Finishing work, driving back to my home address, and just got out of the car, my stepdad and my mum stood waiting for me. And they told me my little brother had died. And it was definitely a defining moment in my life. It was towards the end of about 2015. As a family, we decided we wanted to start raising some money for charity. And what was settled upon was a humongous bike ride. It was about 700 miles. And then, tragically, on the 12th of August, I had a phone call, and it was from my eldest brother to say that my dad had an accident 2 days after finishing the bike ride, and he'd passed away. Having that knowledge that whatever you're going through is going to come to an end can be quite reassuring.
Hello and welcome to Leaders in Disguise, the podcast where we uncover the real stories of resilience, vulnerability and strength beyond the titles. I'm Gary Parsons, your host and a passionate advocate for mental health and well-being in leadership. Each episode we explore the journeys of remarkable individuals who faced both professional and personal challenges, shining a light on the realities often hidden behind the mask of leadership. Today we're joined by John Coogan, a long-serving officer in the police force whose life has been marked by incredible achievements and profound personal loss. In our conversation, John shares how he navigated these deeply impactful experiences, what it's like to lead under pressure, and how he has found his way back to purpose and well-being. Get ready for a powerful episode of resilience, honesty, and the strength it takes to step up, not just for others, but for yourself too. John, welcome to Leaders in Disguise. Great to sit down with you. Thank you so much for travelling all the way from down south in Swindon, aren't you, where you travel from up to sunny Derbyshire. When you arrived, it was raining. I think it stopped. So how are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm very good. Yeah, really excited to be here. I know we've been talking about it for a long time. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here and to have a conversation. So
yeah,
looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think really important. You're going to add a whole new dimension to the show today. I know that's, for me, you've excited me just hearing some of the things that you've done. But also we've got some really sensitive challenges that you've experienced personally, work, but particularly personally as well. So we'll get into those. But before we start, who is John? Let's chat to give you a bit of a brief opportunity to just tell us who John is.
And that is a really big question, and I'm sure I could go on for a long time. So do stop me anytime. I think growing up, I was definitely one of those people who didn't really fit in anywhere. I had friends, associates, but not really any big social groups. And I ended up bouncing around quite a lot between jobs. Went from a call centre to designing and making signs and exhibitions, into financial services, then into IT. Ended up being IT manager in Chelsea and Westminster. And from there, I think there's been a few defining moments in my life, really. And one of them was when I made a big change from financial services IT manager into policing. Did that for a significant period of time. I've no doubt we'll go into that a bit more detail as well and talk about what that's actually like. And then had a few quite significant personal challenges. So I had my little brother who died when he was 24. So he was 10 years younger than me in 2014. And then just 2 short years later, my stepdad passed away as well in an accident. And it was just really compounding the grief that I was already going through. So that was a big defining moment in my life. And I did another change. And that's when I started my own business. Was running that through COVID. So that was manufacturing, importing, designing. And that was gym equipment. So did that for a few years. And ever since then, I've still banded around a little bit. I don't like to be quiet or I just really thrive on being busy. So as well as doing that, I left that company and I've started working in a business mentorship. I've got another business about to launch, which should be going live in about 3 months' time. So working on that currently. In the process of writing a book, and I've also got my new podcast as well. So it's keeping very busy at the moment. So that's literally launched about 10 days ago, called Mindset Mavericks. So that's a brief overview, I think, of what I'm up to.
And a lot of stuff in there. So just summarising, so you incredible journey going from financial services to policing. Obviously, you've had those really significant personal, professional challenges as well. I think we need to start with how on earth does somebody go from financial services and go into policing? Because there's just start it where we may end a chat in a moment. You moved into a really high pressure environment of counter-terrorism. How did you get into policing? Why did we go there?
So again, going back years, I said about bouncing around quite a bit, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I think as a child growing up, maybe 7-8 years old, I'd always wanted to be a police dog handler. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. I ended up just falling into jobs as you do, going to college, ended up doing designs and exhibitions, and then just trying to find a career, really, not really having any defined place I wanted to be. So I ended up joining a call centre, started doing financial planning qualifications, and got to 18 years old, 19 years old, and decided I was going to move to London. So again, quite a big change. And it was at that moment that I started to look at jobs in London, found a financial services company, did a few applications, ended up in London, and was working in financial services for 2 or 3 years with an IT background, which I'd done qualifications through college and some evening ones, and ended up being an IT manager for this company in Chelsea and Westminster, which was a fantastic opportunity. I was 22, 23 years old. I'd got a senior or quite a significant position for a very, very profitable company. And I think that's one of the things that I realised it wasn't fulfilling for me. So I was going in every day, doing the work. It was essentially making a lot of rich people richer. And it had the typical culture of go to lunch, have a beer. After work, credit card gets put behind a bar and everyone stays and has a few beers. And it just didn't feel like it was fulfilling any of my needs. I thought there must be more to it. And there's one evening I sat down at home, just put the TV on, and a programme came up, and it was about a unit based out of Charing Cross Police Station. And it was essentially a unit that's tracking down and investigating paedophiles. And as I sat there, I was watching it, it just felt like there was a drive for me to do that. I was like, I need to do something which is offering more to the world. And that evening, I downloaded the application form, put the application form in, and I think about 9 months later, it's quite a long process, but 9 months later, that was it. I was in the police.
Quite a purposeful change then for you. Like you say, it's great and a great life going to work and going to the pub afterwards, but actually, would you say it was purpose that led you then, and that lack of purpose?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely down to purpose. And I think it is when you look back on life and things you've experienced that you understand where purpose has come from. And there's one particular incident which I'd witnessed at school, and it was a girl who was same age as me, must have been about 13, getting quite badly bullied at school. And I'd witnessed her being spat at. She was being verbally abused at school. And being that kind of age, you do have that bystander feeling where you don't want to get involved, you don't want to be the next victim. You are 12, 13 years old, so you do think more about yourself. And the fact I didn't do anything on that occasion definitely stuck with me, and it is something where I was in a position to do something, whether it was intervene or tell somebody about it, but I didn't, and I didn't want that to happen again. And that's definitely something that has stayed with me, even to now. That's 30 years later, I can still remember it quite vividly. And from that, well, having that in my mind, so I want to actually be out there helping people. And if there's people that are vulnerable, people who need help, people who can't stand up or speak up for themselves, then I'd want to be there to do that.
Joe, it's a really interesting, difficult word that you used a few minutes ago as well, where you said that you saw a program on TV and you saw that it was all about them tracking down paedophiles and, you know, going through the process that they do to arrest and hopefully convict them. That's a really, as you were talking then, I was reflecting on that and thinking that emotionally and being involved in something like that is quite hard. Great with this really strong sense of justice that you've had. How does somebody, I'm sure you've seen some things that you never want anybody to ever see. How do you manage your own mental health during that process and draw that boundary again?
Yeah, as you said, there's a lot of things I experienced. It was in policing for a long time, and just out of respect for the people I've been dealing with, I wouldn't speak about a specific instance. But there's certainly a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and I was 23 at the time, so again, it's not that much life experience. And I think at that time it was very much just get on with it. I don't think there was much talked about. I remember early instances where very significant traumatic experience happened, and again, it's just that culture of if something happens, you'll go down the pub, have a pint, have a chat with your mates about it, move on, crack on the next day. And I'm glad to say I think a lot of that culture is changing, both just within friendship groups and socially and professionally, whether it's in policing or if it's any other industry. I'm glad to see that is changing. But yeah, I think it's definitely was one that was pretty much ignored, and it was leave your problems at the door and try and have that separation. It is a skill you get quite good at as well, just being able to separate work and personal life, which I think you have to do. You could easily become emotionally involved and be not necessarily have too much empathy for it, but you can certainly let that get in the way of your decision making.
So really interestingly, I didn't think that I'd end up talking about this today, but you've gone into the police force. You've thought, great, there's a career here for me to actually progress through and grow and eventually lead teams. What opportunities are available for somebody like you? Clearly you saw something there.
Yeah, I think like most of my life, actually, if I'm honest, a lot of it's not been planned. A lot of it is just looking at what opportunities are available in front of you and keeping that open mind, not having a closed mind to anything that comes up. So just be willing to try things out. I think I've, as you mentioned, gone into policing. I've done many different roles, focused a lot on investigations, interviewing, detective roles, and I've had the opportunity to work in many different areas across the country and occasionally internationally as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and it's just, like I say, keeping your mind open, just be willing to push your comfort zones. And just if you are afraid of trying something out, one of the things that I've always done is think to myself, what would the person that I want to be do? And then do it that way. And I think that's really helped me over the years. So rather than, because I'm naturally quite possibly shy or reserved, I'm not that loud. And so actually what I want to do is put myself out there. I want to go for that role. And the person that I want to be is a person who would put themselves forward for it. And it's just a way of removing my own insecurities and realising, actually, if I want to be who I want to be, then you've got to push those comfort zones and just test the waters all the time.
Because you've had a really successful career. You've moved around and moved through and moved up into, like say, joining there and being on the front line right through to leading teams of people. Have you enjoyed it?
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah. It's been an amazing career. I've loved the moments of it. It's a great deal of satisfaction, which is what I missed from those early years in my career. So yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone really. And I think one of the things, talking about leading teams as well, is just what I've definitely learned over the years is about being vulnerable with your teams and how much of an impact that has on performance and just how much you gel as a team. So I think there's a lot of things I've learned specifically through that type of work that's helped both in my personal life and relationships with partners, with family, with friends, and also in leadership as well. There's a lot of lessons that I've learned from having to deal with quite traumatic events and try and support people through that.
because I was just hearing that then, and I was thinking that is a really high pressured environment. I know we've talked off camera about like 16-hour days, and did you say to me earlier that you were doing, well, how many hours was it you did in one day?
There's definitely been periods over the years of doing consistently 16-hour days. I've done a shift at 26 hours before, and
Wow.
and it is stressful. There's still having that pressure to make key decisions which could ultimately affect somebody's life. So trying to work to a high standard, making sure you've got still got professional decision making, is a pressured environment. And there's definitely tools and tips that I've learned over the years to make sure that does happen, that you don't drop your engagement in what you're doing despite those high pressures.
I was going to ask you because I'm sure there's some real value and transferables in other careers for founders, for leaders in other industries. How does a leader in a really high pressured environment, and I'm sure you, like we say, you've seen things that you'd never want me to have experienced or say, or firsthand. How do you manage your own mental health and well-being as a leader of a team that is under that pressure?
I think it has definitely continued to progress and develop over the years, and I think one of the things that we will come on to speak about is the deaths of my little brother and my stepdad, which definitely had quite a profound impact on those skills too. I think with in terms of leadership, and I've just touched on it about being vulnerable, and there's probably 5 steps in total that I'd say are really key to being a leader, and one is around active listening. And it's not just actually listening to what's being said, but it's for example, if you're in a team meeting, not always being the first person to speak, letting your team give their opinions and showing you value those opinions, whether you go with that decision or not. It's kind of irrelevant. You need to build meaning, safety and resources in teams. And the meaning is making people feel valued. And it's building those connections, hearing what people have got to say, and valuing their opinions. It's making sure you as a leader and your team all feel valued and part of something, having a sense of purpose. And one of the key things for me is around safety. And it's not just physical safety I'm talking about in team, it's psychological safety. It's that space where you can speak up if you're having a bad day, if you're going through a traumatic period at home, or if you're just struggling from whatever it might be. It could be grief, as it has been in my case. It could be a new baby, but it's just having psychological safety to speak up and let people know how you're feeling. And I think that's missing a lot in teams, and especially I'd say from leaders, where leaders have that pressure of putting on a mask and keeping that mask on to be the one who's always in control, who's the decision maker. And I think that's not always the healthiest thing to do.
Is that not, sorry to jump in there, is that not, I'm trying to think of the right way to explain it. Obviously in the police force you have different ranks of officers. Do you think, is that part of the system though, is that your officer is there and he or she or they have to be that step above everybody else, and that hierarchical is that, I'm just wondering whether that hierarchical system might be an issue there already, and I don't know what the alternative is. I'm not gonna, unfortunately I've not got all the answers. There's definitely lots of questions, but that hierarchical side of things, to go, look, you are the team, I am the detective sergeant, whatever you might be, to say, look, I've got to wear a mask to a degree. Is that appropriate for the police force?
I think again it comes down to that communication. It's being willing to hear people's opinions and hear their voices. I think there's definitely times when you do have to make decisions and you have to give orders, and that could be whether it's in any industry. There's times that decisions have to be made and they have to be cascaded down, and it's got to be done immediately. But I think by opening up those channels of communication, showing that you value people's opinions, have those discussions. If you're not going to go with what they've brought to you, having discussions to show that you respect their input and explaining why you're not going with it, then it means that those times when those orders do have to be made, you've got that trust there and people will go with you and follow you as a leader. So it's just making sure you're open to suggestions, you are having that communication, and then people are going to follow you when you do have to make those tough decisions.
That's the word I was looking for, the orders.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you're duty bound to follow an order. Is how I understand it.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So ultimately, I'm not asking you, this needs to be done, and that's for someone to doubt your decision. That must be incredibly hard for somebody to doubt what you're saying, because they need to listen. And like you talk about psychological safety, the physical safety of somebody. I'm going to ask, are there any incidents that we know about publicly that you've been involved in where you've had to make those tough calls?
I think those tough calls come on a day-to-day basis anyway. I think it is one of those, like I say, as long as you're making it for the right reason, you're willing to be open, because you haven't always got the right answers. And part of the process of building a good team is having those people in place that you trust. It's having the people who've got the knowledge and the skills to do that role. And you should be asking for feedback and should be asking for that input. And a lot of successful teams is about giving that autonomy to teams. And that comes back to the meaning and safety and resources. It's having people empowered to do their role. So actually, by including them in decision making, you're being a better leader. You're taking the best information you can from the best source that you can, which is quite often going to be your team.
I keep hearing that phrase, MSR. I've got on my notes here as well. That's something that seems to be quite drilled into you. Was that something that you learned from somebody else?
Yeah, I think as you can imagine, I've done leadership course over the years, but I think the meaning, safety, and resource is definitely something that's resonated for me, and I think it is because it's whether it's professional environment or at home, and it's, like I say, meaning, just having that sense of purpose, and it's building those human connections, having an understanding of what you're trying to achieve, making that mission clear to your teams. And as I said, the safety and safety for being able to speak up. Physical safety is obviously important, but the one that is often misunderstood or not taken into account as much is that psychological safety. Yeah. And I think that's the same with personal relationships, whether it's your partner or family. It's just being able to say, this has happened, I'm not happy with how it's happened, and it's made me feel this way. And it's just a huge impact that has on people if they feel unable to be able to speak up and say those things, whether it's professional or personal relationship. And the last one, which you said, is the R, which is resources. And it could be the resources in terms of other staffing. Have you actually physically got enough people to do the task that you're aiming to do? But it can be things like the correct software. Have you got appropriate staffing areas, places for lunch? And it's just making sure you've got all those resources to make sure that your workforce feels comfortable and appreciated. Thank you.
One of the things that you mentioned briefly, I'm going to jump into it now, you've mentioned it a few times, is about your brother and your dad, your stepdad. I feel like we need to talk about this. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you, because it's a big part of your life, a big change.
It certainly is.
So I think you were working at the police force at the time.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what happened with the tragedy?
So again, it was quite a high pressure time. It's lots going on with work. I'm quite frequently working 12 plus hour days. And my brother was, he's 10 years younger than me. He had always been quite different from me. So he's quite out there, happy to go out and socialise, go off on his own and do a lot of things I probably wouldn't have done at his age. And he used to go travelling for 6 weeks or so, Thailand or Cambodia, and come back, work, and then off he'd go again.
A little bit jealous, actually. Yeah.
So it always sounded amazing. Sounded like he was having a fantastic time anytime he'd go away. And at work one day, he'd been off travelling in Thailand, and remember very vividly just finishing work, driving back to my home address, and as I got out of the car, my stepdad and my mum stood waiting for me. And so it's not anything that ever happened before. Didn't really know what was happening. They clearly looked like something was up. And they told me my little brother had died. And it was definitely a defining moment in my life. It felt like everything crumbled in an instant. Went into the house and tried to find out more, but there wasn't much we could be told. So my little brother, 24 years old, travelling in Thailand, we know that he'd had a very significant fall and never really can know what happened. He was on his own at the time. Has so much, and that alone brings a lot of issues and just so many questions, which I think I spent months just pondering what had happened, how did it happen, who was there, was anyone responsible, did he take his own life, did he fall, and then just all the emotions that come with it, whether it's anger from he's a good person, why has it happened to him, there's so many other people who are worse in the world, why is of all the people that could have died, is it him? And yeah, I think just from that moment on, I say for months and very long period, not feeling able to speak to anyone as well, which is one of the lasting memories. All my family were in exactly the same position. They've all just lost a son, a brother. And how do you speak to somebody and open up, and then open up those wounds in the other people as well, whether they're going through depression or seeing counsellors? And it did feel a very lonely time.
Did you have time out of work?
Very little, actually. And I think that's just because I didn't really know what to do with myself. I didn't think I'd know, would it make anything better? I didn't think it would. Would go into work probably be a distraction and make me just not think about it? And that's definitely the route I took. So I think I had 1 week off work and was back to it. And part of the other reason, I think, is not, I was going to say shame, but that's not the right word. But I think just the thought of coming back to work and having been off for an extended period of time, and then everyone asking questions or coming up and talking to you about it, I didn't want to put that off. I didn't look forward to it. I just wanted to be left alone, but I knew it was coming. So my thought at the time was, I just want to get that done, try and forget what's happened and push it under a rug, which clearly isn't the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, is that like rip the plaster off and just go, well, someone's going to ask me all of these questions, so let's just get it out of their way with.
That was exactly it.
It's I've seen people. My business partner years ago lost his father, and he just carried on working. And I said, well, we knew he was going to be passing away. He had cancer. He wasn't well, and he said to me, "Oh no, I'm just going to carry on. Just going to carry on working." And I had to force him out of the office. I'm sure you won't mind me mentioning that. To force him out of the office, and I said, "Look, you need to be at home right now. I know you're trying to find other stuff to do, and I know this doesn't feel like you can do anything else, but you need to be at home." And actually what he said to me afterwards was, it's quite administratively heavy as well. You know, like you take the emotion out of it for a moment. There's a lot of things that need to be thought about and done and looked after. And I don't know whether it would have been the same in the case where you were, but there's a lot of things that need to be done, and you need the headspace. Your capacity is a lot less than most people's would be. Were you just back on those 16-hour days?
It was pretty much back to as I had been doing. So yeah, it was still intense work, still dealing with traumatic events. And I'm sure I've had people during, I can think of one in particular actually, who was similar to what you're saying, is you need to take some time out. And yeah, I don't think I really knew what was best for me at that time. And I think, and we'll touch on it in a second, but after my stepdad passed away as well, there's definitely aspects that I started to rethink and started to build those tools to have a bit more self-compassion and self-care, and a few things I started to put in place to make sure I was coping better and taking a bit more control and care of my own mental health.
So I think let's jump into that, and I'm going to just frame it slightly different for a moment. So because it's when you started telling me this story off camera and off mic, it sounded really wonderful and exciting. So your brother had passed away. Obviously, that was the real sad shock, and then your father and somebody else was involved in this really exciting, lovely event that was going on.
Yeah, so my brother passed away in 2014, and towards the end of about 2015, as a family, we decided we wanted to start raising some money for charity. We'd chosen a charity called Papyrus, which is an amazing charity to raise funds to prevent young suicide. And what was settled upon was a humongous bike ride. It was about 700 miles from northern France all the way down to Nice in south of France. So my brothers, my mum, my stepdad had friends, family, loads of people involved in this charity bike ride, 750 miles. Raised about £10,000 in preparation for it. So it was a fantastic sum. All quite excited about it. And
great for a charity to have £10,000 is amazing.
Yeah, and the kind of funny premise for it was my little brother George, when he was a few years younger, decided he was going to do a bike ride from Swindon to France. And I think he made it about 30 miles, ended up getting a puncture, turning around, and never happened. And that's what spurred this idea on of the bike ride to France, is to finish the trip that he never...
That one that he turned around and came back.
Exactly. And there was one other thing that made for me, certainly, this whole situation worse, was that, again, I was working intense hours. I was very busy with a number of projects, and I decided not to do the bike ride event because the amount of times it would take for training and all the rest of it, and decided I was going to do my own event. So I signed up for essentially a 54 mile run, which I was going to do on my own and raise money another way. So this bike ride took place in August 2016, and I didn't go on it myself, but saw all the pictures, heard all the stories, was following it along intensely. And everyone started saying about how my stepdad it's the first time they'd really seen him smile and started to come back to himself. And it was fantastic to hear that and see some of the pictures, and all looked like they were having a great time for the first time in a couple of years. And then tragically on the 12th of August in 2016, again, I was at work, which was quite typical. I had a phone call, and it was from my eldest brother to say that my dad had an accident 2 days after finishing the bike ride, and he'd passed away. He'd taken a trip out, again on the bikes with some family and friends, a few miles east of Nice, I think it was, going towards Monaco, and had an accident and passed away in France. So this is just 2 years later, and then I'm literally the only person stuck in England on my own. Friends, family, everyone else is in France. And again, it's just compounded everything that happened those 2 short years before. And it was all those same feelings again. And I think particularly with the training that I'd had, and I'd done emergency life saving, I'd done a lot of first aid work and had a lot of that type of training. And it was all those questions: should I have been there? Could I have helped if I was there? Would I have been able to essentially save him if I'd gone on it? Why didn't I go on this trip? And then all those feelings of guilt and words that you put on yourself about what you should have done differently.
Thank you for talking me through that. I'm sure that's hard. So even now I can see it's difficult to talk about. I think, in such a short space of time, it was a incredibly challenging. I can't begin to imagine it. I'm struggling to find the words to relate for you, because it's a shock. I'm just throw the questions that I've got on this lovely iPad in front of me. I'm just picturing you at work, managing this team, this high stakes, high pressure team that you're involved in. Where does a leader in the police, in specialised areas that you're in, where do you go? What does the support team even look like, or support network, should I say?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of help that is available, and as I mentioned earlier, things are so much better in recent times than they were 20 plus years ago. So there is access to counselling, there's welfare teams, there's a whole range of services that are available. I think one of the problems is that stigma, and also the thoughts of what impact that's going to have on other areas. And I think this equally applies in any job that you could be in, but if you go and seek psychological support, or you want to speak to somebody about mental health, is that going to have an impact on your career? Is it going to prevent you from going for a leadership role? Is it going to prevent you from applying for the next job that you see come up? And I think there's a lot of barriers like that where it's just the unknown. You don't know. You seek to minimize what you're going through. You don't want to put it out there. You don't want everyone to know about what you're going through. And it's for those reasons as to whether it is just trying to protect yourself and not let anyone see you've got flaws, or if it is you're trying to protect your own career. So I think there's a lot of barriers out there. Thankfully, there is support out there, but I don't think that discussion's fully immersed in society, really, as to how open it should be.
So are you saying that potentially it's our own mindset that needs to be fixed? I hate that word fixed, but developed, worked on.
Yeah, I think it comes down to both personal mindset and also just having those open and vulnerable discussions in the workplace. I think that's a healthy place to be, is to share some of your own experiences, and I think that does build connections and it helps build your team, and it just allows for a bit more understanding. One of the things that does happen frequently is if somebody's underperforming, it's seen as a performance issue. Whereas actually there's a lot more to it most of the time. It's, why is that person underperforming? Is it actually underperformance, or is it due to stresses or personal circumstances? And you don't get to find out unless you're speaking to those and having those open, honest conversations. And that does require some vulnerability as a leader.
Have you ever had any leaders that have been leading you be open and vulnerable? I'm just wondering where this comes from, that you've been able to open more.
Yeah, I think there's two in particular. I think I've experienced both ends of the spectrum. One where it is very much, you've got a job to do, get in, do your job, and leave your problems at the door. And I've definitely experienced that. And I think that's at all stages of my careers, really. I think I've encountered different people. So it's definitely a personal thing where you do have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And you only do that by testing the waters. And it does allow your team to open up with you as well. So it's by sharing part of yourself, you get to find out more about your teams and build those connections and build that meaning and purpose within the team.
And then just specifically, any examples of any leaders that have been able to be vulnerable with you? Can you think back over the years where someone's shown that quality with you?
Yeah, I think there's there's one in particular, Andy, who was an amazing boss for me. He was always very open. He's had a lot of those qualities that I've spoken about, where he would ask your opinion, what you think you should be doing, and you could see it was valued. And he'd respect your opinion. He would always come and offer feedback and just be very open professionally, but also share parts of his personal life as well, whether it's what his family were up to at the weekend, what his daughters were doing, if they're going for a job, all that information be shared, and just gave that safe space that I keep speaking about to be open. I can remember one particular instance where it was following the death of my brother, and he inadvertently said something which made me just immediately revert back to the time when I found out about it. And it was just an innocuous comment, and it just immediately made me think straight back to it and put me straight back in that place where I'd found out about my brother. But it did mean, because of the relationship we had, I could confidently go to my boss effectively and say, what you've just said has upset me. Would you be a bit more careful in the future, and explain the reason why? And it was received very well. And it could be the world of difference, because if you didn't have somebody who's so open, that could have gone very differently. And it's being, just along those lines, being receptive to feedback as well as a leader.
Yeah.
And I say about valuing people's opinions and allowing people to give their ideas, and it's just being receptive and trying not to take things as a personal attack, because inherently people aren't trying to set out to hurt you, and I think generally the world's a good place still despite everything. And I think it's just sitting back and trying to see the intention behind what somebody's saying to you and not take everything personally.
Have you ever gone out there and, I think I know the answer to this, gone out there and had like professional support like CBT or counselling, trauma, whatever it might be?
I've certainly spoken to a couple of professionals ad hoc over the years. I say I've worked in some quite traumatic areas for a number of years, so I've definitely had some inputs. I think one of the things I actually did, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is just the idea of continued lifelong learning. And the whole mindset and self-reflection is so important, whatever stage of life you're at. And one of the things that I've done in the last few years went on to complete a counselling qualification myself. And that's definitely helped me understand myself more and improve the relationships I'm having with others, and improve that openness that I'm very keen to try and spread.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you've gone, this is how I can help. And you hear it a lot, don't you, where people have experienced challenges, good, bad, whatever it might be, and they want to then give it back in another way. So that is really interesting, because just for clarity, I guess, at the moment, so you're still very much part of the police. That's still a job, that's still what you get paid to do, but you're doing other things as well?
I do, yeah, so much more really. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the changes. I did say that a significant turning point in my life, what's happened to my brother and my dad. And after my dad had passed away, I did have a lot of those feelings of feeling a little bit lost, not really sure how to recover or come back from it, seeing family and friends essentially sinking into a hole. And I can see how that can happen, how you can sink into depression. And I spent months just asking myself so many questions, going over the situations for both of them. Could anything have been different? And eventually I did come to the realization that I can't change what's happened, and just focusing on the past is what's going to cause me depression, or worrying about the future is going to cause me anxiety. And all I can really do is think about the type of people they were, try and embody the type of traits they had and live through them, or have them live through me. It's trying to get their best traits out and live for the moment. My brother was very fun. He was very confident. He was outgoing. He was experimental, would try anything out. My dad was extremely sociable. He was very good at telling stories, and just a really engaging person. And he would do anything for anyone. Sorry. So one of the things I decided to do was, actually, I'm going to try and embody some of those things and live for the moment. You never know what's going to happen around the corner. You don't know how much time you've got left. If there's something you want to try, you need to do it. And that's where I started to really lean into businesses. So back in 2016, I'd started having all these thoughts, and I started to get really into fitness as well. It's one of the things that helped me get through the tough times. And I think that the two different aspects for me with fitness was, you either go into a gym and you're completely focused on what you're doing, the weight you're lifting or the burpees you're about to do, and you just forget everything in the world. Or the alternative is, you can go into the gym, put your headphones on, and just be mindful, think about and process whatever emotions it is you're going through. So I really got into the gym, and it did definitely help my mental health. It boosted serotonin. It made me feel a lot better. And I started to think, actually, it's benefited me in so many ways. I want to try and share this with the world too. And that's when I started my first real business. And that was a gym equipment company. So we set up a gym equipment company, me and a friend from school. Started a manufacturing process, designs.
So you really got into it then?
Really got into it. I did advanced sports and exercise nutrition qualification. I did personal training qualifications. So went all in, which I quite often do. So yeah, started this business, and that was just before COVID. So about 2019, all going well. We're having equipment manufactured overseas, imported, sold across the UK, selling to gyms, selling to homes, all going amazingly. E-commerce side all set up, and then COVID hit, which was just another challenge. And once we had COVID hit, shipping costs suddenly skyrocketed, and it's just one more thing. You think everything's plain sailing, and costs went from about £2,000 for a shipping container up to about £12,000.
Wow.
And it's a significant challenge in itself. You've still got the bills to pay, you've still got manufacturers to pay, you've got all the normal costs, you've got employees that need paying, and it's just a last minute panic of what we're going to do. Again, it's just one thing after another. It was feeling like one thing after another at this point. And we started looking at how to pivot the business. How can we bring in funds from other places? How can we change the direction we're going in and try and still keep bringing money in, keep customers happy? It was COVID, so one of those things that I'd been very keen to do was boost people's mental health through fitness, and we know how much that helped people through COVID. So we did pivot to primarily at home selling. Managed to weather out the storm really, and we started to do social events, putting on competitions for fitness, managed to get some sponsorship through some large companies such as Puma, so managed to navigate that storm and get out the other side.
Exciting. So where did that business go? What did that's because I'm reflecting on what you said there, and I'm thinking, yeah, really challenged, but it's knowing to pivot and not just giving up. Because I think we talk a lot about success and failure on this podcast. You could have seen that as a huge failure. Okay, bad timing, let's give up. But you still persevered on with it for a while. Where did that get to?
So that business continued. Ended up having gyms coming under our branding. So there's still gyms in a number of places now, which are all under our original branding.
Yeah.
What I did decide to do is I left that company. So I got to a stage a couple of years ago, and I decided actually I want to try and pursue some other areas. So I did step back from that company, signed everything over, and I've been doing a number of other projects that we've spoken about already. So I've moved into a little bit about helping other businesses, people who are wanting to start a business and don't know where to begin. I think there's a lot of barriers where people have got great ideas and want to share their ideas with the world, but don't know where to start. And that's one of the things I love doing. So I'm doing some coaching and mentoring for new startup businesses and entrepreneurs. And through a book that I've got upcoming as well, which is called Strength in the Storm, actually, and that is about building resilience and embracing change. And that's one of the things that we've just spoken about with the first business, having to pivot, and it's how to overcome challenges, and that's whether it's in personal life or through business.
And you've had plenty of challenges, if you don't mind me saying
Yes.
that in that way. Well, one of the phrases that I've heard a lot over my years, certainly in like the HR people space, is that mental resilience.
Yeah.
Where does that sit with you as a terminology? How would you define mental resilience? Because you've had to show it.
Yeah, I think.
Or have you? Forgive me the phrasing on that.
I think the best way of thinking about it is this too shall pass, whatever that might be, and that relates to all the good times and all the bad times. And if you think back to something where you've set your heart on achieving a goal and you've achieved it, or there's a particular thing you've wanted to buy, you've had your heart set on buying a particular item. It could be a camera, it could be a new TV, a car, it could be anything, and you've waited months or even years to get there. Once you've got it, that amazing feeling you've got, it lasts, but it doesn't last forever. And that's equally the same for the bad experiences. Whatever it is that you're going through, there is going to be an end to it. So having that knowledge that whatever you're going through is going to come to an end can be quite reassuring. And I think it's just the ability to understand that's going to happen, and whatever obstacles do come up, you will come out the other side of it, and you can come out of the other side of it.
Like you say, weather the storm. Ultimately.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I can see where you got the name for it now. Absolutely. It must have been quite an interesting process for you to go through to reflect. Has it been quite therapeutic for you, quite cathartic for you to write this book?
It really has, yeah. It's something I've been wanting to write for a long time. As you said, there's been a lot of challenges that I've had to overcome, whether it's through personal life or professionally. And again, with what's happening with my dad and my brother, I made a decision, actually, if I want to do it, I need to do it. I can't just keep putting it off. You don't know what's around the corner. And it's actually been really good to look back and understand why I am the way I am, which we don't often do. And I think similar to journaling's an amazing thing to do, and it's to put your thoughts down on paper and just let them sit there. You don't have to do anything with them. You might screw them up and chuck them away, but actually getting stuff down on paper can help you process it and understand what it is that sits behind it. And that can be for anything that you feel. If you're having personal relationship issues, if you're writing down how you're feeling, it can help you understand where the other person's coming from too, and it just helps you understand, why am I feeling this way? Where does that feeling come from? Does that stem from something that's happened 20 years ago that I've not quite processed and it hasn't left me? And that could be down to insecurities, where you've had somebody insult you as a child and then you can be defensive from that. But I think just really writing down what your thoughts are, and that can help you process and understand where those thoughts are coming from, make you realise that's not necessarily the reality.
I've got some quick fire questions, if I
Okay.
might, because we're quickly running out of time. So you've been in really, like we said, high stake, high pressured environments. Imposter syndrome, it must be something that comes up all the time for people, because you can't plan for every eventuality, I'm sure. What's your top tip for overcoming imposter syndrome?
As you said, I've experienced it many times, all of the time. In fact, I've said I've recently started a podcast in the last week or so.
We've not spoken about the podcast yet.
Yeah,
We'll come on to that in a minute. Yeah.
So that's a new thing for me. I've never spoken on camera. I've never put anything on radio shows. I've never done anything like that. So putting out that first episode, 100% had imposter syndrome. And I think really what it comes down to is what I'd said earlier, and that's, what would the person that I want to be do? And if you're always focusing on that, then you can remove yourself from the equation and just go for it anyway. If you want to be more confident, or if you want to be a better public speaker, you've got to do public speaking to do it.
So practice. I can't use the word practice makes perfect, because I got told off by my friend and our little girls. They say practice makes you better.
Yep.
So just keep doing it, basically. Yeah,
Exactly.
I guess, like you say, in the environments that you've been in, you've got support around you. You've got experienced people around you. My personal tip would be I know we're both on the Help to Grow program that the government's got at this moment in time. Delivering mentoring to those people on that. And I would say, just surround yourself with a good mentor, a good coach, somebody that knows what's going on, because they will help you and they will pull you out of that imposter syndrome zone and help you through it. Because, you're absolutely right. Go and do it. Go and give it a try. Absolutely agree with you. We touched on resilience, but resilience is essential in some really tough situations. What practical steps can listeners, viewers be doing from your point of view to be building their own resilience?
I think we've touched on some of them already. I think one is definitely mindfulness, and it is sitting with your thoughts and actually having a bit of time to relax and not be distracted. Today's world is so full of distractions, whether it's Netflix, TikTok, and just never-ending interruptions and distractions. And I think that's something that's missing now, is just time to sit. You're allowed to be bored.
Yeah.
And people aren't often bored anymore, because there's always something to do, whether it's browsing Google or any of those things I've mentioned. So a bit of mindfulness, spend some time just on your own, nothing going on, don't need music, just have your thoughts, sit with them, process them. They can go off in wild directions, and that's perfectly okay. But I think just having a bit of time for mindfulness and meditation.
Interesting. Do you know, my next question was about burnout and how, managing stress in a demanding environment. And I wonder whether it's a similar answer, is that, that what your go-to strategies are to manage stress and avoid burnout, particularly in, I keep going back to these 16-hour days that you used to do. Please don't tell me you still do 16-hour days in your part-time.
Yeah, there's probably five tips. I think we've covered some of them already, but so one is around exercise. There's so many amazing benefits from exercise. You're getting that serotonin release. You're having that space to clear your thoughts, or just have everything out of your mind and focus on the moment and just being present in that moment. Second one is sleep. I do amazingly long days, but it's just having a good routine for sleep. And that could be different for everyone, but for me, what I tend to do is I'd shower at least an hour before bed. Showering, bathing, it all's going to interrupt your temperature. So just do it about an hour before bed, have a nighttime tea, have a specific set of sequences you have before bed that sets you up, so when you get into bed, you're ready to sleep.
What's it called? Sleep hygiene? I think that's...
Yeah.
My neighbour's done a sleep hygiene course or something like that, and her sleep is brilliant now. But yeah, I think sleep is one of those things that we don't talk about enough, and that makes such a big difference. I know there was studies, wasn't there, around dementia and later in life, and actually how sleep it helps later in life and things as well. So yes, but sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so mindfulness and meditation, sleep, exercise, which we've spoken about already, journaling and getting those thoughts out on paper. And sometimes I might just use my phone. I'll write down what I'm thinking, why I'm feeling that way, and then that might be it. I might delete it the next day. But getting it out just helps me to get rid of it out of my mind, and then it's gone. And the other one is social connections. I think particularly, again, now, it's very different from was hundreds of years ago, where there was a lot more social clubs and lots of other meeting places. And I think particularly in cities, and where there is such a workforce that works so far apart from each other, that people aren't as social as they used to be, and it's easy to miss those connections and not actually pick up the phone and speak to somebody. But that's part of processing your emotions. That's part of feeling part of something and having some purpose. So just fostering those social connections with people, whether it's friends or family.
So a long time ago, I've got a great coach now, by the way. Had a person that I worked with a short amount of time that helped coach me. And one of the things that we talked about was community. And I'd built such this amazing community around me. The restaurant I went to up the road on a Saturday morning to go and have a breakfast sandwich, whatever it might be. The shop that I went to go and buy my vegetables from, whatever it might be. Friends, just connection with people. And I realised personally that community was something so much more than just this friends and family. And yeah, someone that, what do they say? Community is a bit like I not get too much into it, but I watch far too much TV sometimes. But the Coronation Streets, or the Rover's Return of Coronation Street, or the Queen Vic of EastEnders, it's where that community comes together and we all get to see each other and build that connection. And I agree with you. I think it's something that we do a little bit online now, and social media is there to help us along the way. But I feel like we just read each other's comments. We don't interact with each other. So yeah, absolutely agree with you. We pretty much run out of time. There's so much that we can keep talking about. Was there anything that I have not mentioned today that you wanted to? What's going on in John's life otherwise?
Well, I think one other bonus one I'd give just on terms of mental health as well is that I think is worth mentioning is just gratitude.
Yeah.
And just practicing gratitude every day. I think when you do see so much on the news and there's so much negativity around, and you can even focus on the negative things in your life about not being as far along in your journey as you want to be, but actually just practice some gratitude for all the amazing things that are going on in life. And as you've just said with local community centres or your local pub, it's just having gratitude that you've actually got somebody there who can serve you a coffee. And that's the little things which makes your life worth living. Just be grateful for all those small moments, for small achievements in your own life. If you've done something well yesterday, whether it's just in terms of doing a podcast, if you've done well on a podcast episode, recognise that and be like, I'm really proud of myself for what I did yesterday. I did a good job. And just having some gratitude for what you've got going on in your own life and the small things around you. And that makes such a big difference to mental health.
I agree. Look up as well. Stop looking down. Look up and look around you.
Yeah.
And be grateful for the trees, the plants, the things that are living, growing things around you, and be grateful for those. Sounds really cheesy, but I'm really grateful of you coming today. Thank you. How can people? So we've got a book coming out. When's the book coming out? Do we know yet?
You're pushing me on the date now. I think it's the 6th of December. So that's on pre-order on Amazon at the moment. I believe it's 6th of December, certainly in December. And I've got the podcast Mindset Mavericks. That's really just trying to get on, whether it's inspirational, people who've had amazing life stories, entrepreneurs, people who've had challenges in business. And it's just trying to get some understanding in life stories where they can offer some value and guidance and try and help people who've potentially going through situations that they've already been through. So that's what the podcast about Mindset Mavericks. And you can find my own channel at johncoogan.com, and that's got all of my information on.
So John Coogan's at Jon.
Jon.
And then COOGAN.
That's it. Perfect.
.com. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And look forward to hearing the feedback on this episode.
That's great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.